Philip now motioned to the group to remain where they were, while he hurried back to break the news of his decision to his friend Nathanael, who still tarried behind under the mulberry tree, turning over in his mind the many things which he had heard concerning John the Baptist, the coming kingdom, and the expected Messiah. Philip broke in upon these meditations, exclaiming, "I have found the Deliverer, him of whom Moses and the prophets wrote, and whom John has proclaimed." Nathanael, looking up, inquired, "Whence comes this teacher?" And Philip replied, "He is Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph the carpenter, more recently residing at Capernaum." And then, somewhat shocked, Nathanael asked, "Can any such good thing come out of Nazareth?" But Philip, taking him by the arm, said, "Come and see." Philip led Nathanael to Jesus, who, looking benignly into the face of the sincere doubter, said, "Behold a genuine Israelite, in whom there is no deceit. Follow me." And Nathanael, turning to Philip, said, "You are right, he is indeed a master of men. I will also follow, if I am worthy." And Jesus nodded to Nathanael, again saying, "Follow me." Jesus had now assembled one half of his future corps of intimate associates, 5 who had for some time known him, and 1 stranger, Nathanael. Without further delay they crossed the Jordan, and, going by the village of Nain, reached Nazareth late that evening. They all remained overnight with Joseph in Jesus' boyhood home. The associates of Jesus little understood why their new-found teacher was so concerned with completely destroying every vestige of his writing which remained about the home in the form of the 10 Commandments and other mottos and sayings. But this proceeding, together with the fact that they never saw him subsequently write, except upon the dust or in the sand, made a deep impression upon their minds. 3. The visit to Capernaum. The next day Jesus sent his apostles on to Cana, since all of them were invited to the wedding of a prominent young woman of that town, while he prepared to pay a hurried visit to his mother at Capernaum, stopping at Magdala to see his brother Jude. Before leaving Nazareth, the new associates of Jesus told Joseph and other members of Jesus' family about the wonderful events of the then recent past, and gave free expression to their belief that Jesus was the long-expected deliverer. And these members of Jesus' family talked all this over, and Joseph said, "Maybe, after all, Mother was right. Maybe our strange brother is the coming king." Jude was present at Jesus' baptism, and, with his brother James, had become a firm believer in Jesus' mission on earth. Although both James and Jude were much perplexed as to the nature of their brother's mission, their mother had resurrected all her early hopes of Jesus as the Messiah, the Son of David, and she encouraged her sons to have faith in their brother as the deliverer of Israel. Jesus arrived in Capernaum Monday night, but he did not go to his own home, where lived James and his mother. He went directly to the home of Zebedee. All his friends at Capernaum saw a great and pleasant change in him. Once more he seemed to be comparatively cheerful, and more like himself as he was during the earlier years at Nazareth. For years previous to his baptism, and the isolation periods just before and just after, he had grown increasingly serious and self-contained. Now he seemed quite like his old self to all of them. There was about him something of majestic import and exalted aspect, but he was once again light-hearted and joyful. Mary was thrilled with expectation. She anticipated that the promise of Gabriel was nearing fulfillment. She expected all Palestine soon to be startled and stunned by the miraculous revelation of her son as the supernatural king of the Jews. But to all the many questions which his mother, James, Jude, and Zebedee asked, Jesus only smilingly replied, "It is better that I tarry here for a while. I must do the will of my Father who is in heaven." On the next day, Tuesday, they all journeyed over to Cana for the wedding of Naomi, which was to take place on the following day. And in spite of Jesus' repeated warnings that they tell no man about him until the Father's hour shall come, they insisted on quietly spreading the news abroad that they had found the Deliverer. They each confidently expected that Jesus would inaugurate his assumption of messianic authority at the forthcoming wedding at Cana, and that he would do so with great power and sublime grandeur. They remembered what had been told them about the phenomena attendant upon his baptism, and they believed that his future course on earth would be marked by increasing manifestations of supernatural wonders and miraculous demonstrations. Accordingly, the entire countryside was preparing to gather together at Cana for the wedding feast of Naomi and Joab, the son of Nathan. Mary had not been so joyous in years. She journeyed to Cana in the spirit of the Queen Mother on the way to witness the coronation of her son. Not since he was 13 years old had Jesus' family and friends seen him so carefree and happy, so thoughtful and understanding of the wishes and desires of his associates, so touchingly sympathetic. And so they all whispered among themselves, in small groups, wondering what was going to happen. What would this strange person do next? How would he usher in the glory of the coming kingdom? And they were all thrilled with the thought that they were to be present to see the revelation of the might and power of Israel's God. 4. The wedding at Cana. By noon on Wednesday, almost 1,000 guests had arrived in Cana, more than 4 times the number bidden to the wedding feast. It was a Jewish custom to celebrate weddings on Wednesday, and the invitations had been sent abroad for the wedding 1 month previously. In the forenoon and early afternoon it appeared more like a public reception for Jesus than a wedding. Everybody wanted to greet this near-famous Galilean, and he was most cordial to all, young and old, Jew and Gentile. And everybody rejoiced when Jesus consented to lead the preliminary wedding procession. Jesus was now thoroughly self-conscious regarding his human existence, his divine pre-existence, and the status of his combined or fused human and divine natures. With perfect poise he could at one moment enact the human role or immediately assume the personality prerogatives of the divine nature. As the day wore on, Jesus became increasingly conscious that the people were expecting him to perform some wonder. More especially he recognized that his family and his 6 disciple apostles were looking for him appropriately to announce his forthcoming kingdom by some startling and supernatural manifestation. Early in the afternoon, Mary summoned James, and together they made bold to approach Jesus to inquire if he would admit them to his confidence, to the extent of informing them at what hour and at what point in connection with the wedding ceremonies he had planned to manifest himself as the supernatural one. No sooner had they spoken of these matters to Jesus than they saw they had roused his characteristic indignation. He said only, "If you love me, then be willing to tarry with me while I wait upon the will of my Father who is in heaven." But the eloquence of his rebuke lay in the expression of his face. This move of his mother was a great disappointment to the human Jesus, and he was much sobered by his reaction to her suggestive proposal that he permit himself to indulge in some outward demonstration of his divinity. That was one of the very things he had decided not to do when so recently isolated in the hills. For several hours Mary was much depressed. She said to James, "I cannot understand him. What can it all mean? Is there no end to his strange conduct?" James and Jude tried to comfort their mother, while Jesus withdrew for an hour's solitude. But he returned to the gathering, and was once more light-hearted and joyous. The wedding proceeded with a hush of expectancy, but the entire ceremony was finished, and not a move, not a word from the honored guest. Then it was whispered about that the carpenter and boat-builder, announced by John as the deliverer, would show his hand during the evening festivities, perhaps at the wedding supper. But all expectance of such a demonstration was effectually removed from the minds of his 6 disciple apostles, when he called them together just before the wedding supper, and in great earnestness said, "Think not that I have come to this place to work some wonder for the gratification of the curious, or for the conviction of those who doubt. Rather are we here to wait upon the will of our Father who is in heaven." But when Mary and the others saw him in consultation with his associates, they were fully persuaded in their own minds that something extraordinary was about to happen, and they all sat down to enjoy the wedding supper and the evening of festive good fellowship. The father of the bridegroom had provided plenty of wine for all the guests bidden to the marriage feast. But how was he to know that the marriage of his son was to become an event so closely associated with the expected manifestation of Jesus as the Messianic deliverer? He was delighted to have the honor of numbering the celebrated Galilean among his guests, but before the wedding supper was over, the servants brought him the disconcerting news that the wine was running short. By the time the formal supper had ended, and the guests were strolling about in the garden, the mother of the bridegroom confided to Mary that the supply of wine was exhausted. And Mary confidently said, "Have no worry, I will speak to my son. He will help us." And thus did she presume to speak notwithstanding the rebuke of but a few hours before.